study of intellectual property rights and political economy. Professor Maskin, problem of inequality, particularly in developing countries. Crime, increased complexities for customs procedures due to the rapid growth in trade agreements, and have failed to reduce inequality in developing countries. Professor Maskin, please.
Azerbaijan, who invited me here. It's a great pleasure to be back in Baku for the second time. In globalization. By globalization, I mean between countries, but also and delivered on. In fact, we have only to look at what has happened in China and India over the last 20 years to see the power of globalization to improve many millions of people's lives. But globalization has made another promise, which is to reduce the gap between the haves and the have-nots in emerging economies. In other words, to reduce inequality. And this promise has not so successfully been delivered. And again, we can look at China and India as prime examples of emerging economies where inequality has actually increased. In fact, China and India are by no means the only examples. There are dozens of examples around the world of emerging economies where inequality has become a serious problem. Well, in my own country, the United States, and much of Europe, inequality is a big topic these days. There's a presidential campaign beginning to heat up in the U.S., and inequality is a topic which is on all of the candidates' tongues. But for the most part, the politics around inequality has been about inequality in rich countries. This morning, I'd like to talk about inequality in emerging economies. Now, why should we care about reducing inequality? Perhaps many of you take it for granted that inequality is a bad thing, but let me point out that there are at least 3 reasons why we think, most people think of inequality as something to be avoided. First, there's a moral argument. We believe that fundamentally all human beings should be treated alike. We all have equal rights, and extreme inequality in income is an response to that belief in egalitarianism. But even if you don't accept this moral argument, there's a connection between inequality and poverty. That is, particularly in emerging economies, the have-nots are people who are at the poverty line or even well below the poverty line. And so doing something about inequality is at the same time doing something to fight poverty. But even if you don't accept that argument in favor of reducing inequality, there's a much more practical, much more political argument for doing So, and that's the connection with political stability. It's well known that countries with high inequality also are more subject to political and social instability, and therefore, just from a practical standpoint, to hold the society together, it makes sense to try to fight inequality. Well, those are the reasons for trying to do something about inequality. Now let me turn to the theory of the matter. Should we be surprised by the fact that in so many emerging economies, inequality has actually been rising? Well, in fact, the answer is yes, if you accept one of the most long-standing and well-accepted theories in economic theory, the theory of comparative advantage. This is a theory that goes back several centuries. It was first formulated in the early 1800s by PICARD. It's been very successful historically in helping us understand international trade patterns. And it predicts that when international trade increases, we should see a reduction in inequality in emerging economies, just the opposite of what has happened recently. Now, why does it make this prediction? It's worthwhile spending a few minutes understanding things. So let me give you a brief introduction to the theory of comparative advantage. According to this theory, the important difference between countries when it comes to international trade is what those countries have by way of factors of production. Factors of production are the inputs into production. And the reason why we have international trade in the first place is that not all countries are the same when it comes to their endowments of these factors of production. Now, in particular, I'm interested in income today. I want to talk about income inequality, and so I'm going to focus on labor as inequalities. In fact, I want to distinguish between high-skilled labor, people who have highly developed skills, and low-skilled labor, people who are largely untrained and largely uneducated. And for the purpose of understanding the theory of comparative advantage, let's do a little thought experiment. Let's imagine that there are two countries. One country is rich, one country is developing. And why is the rich country rich? Well, from the standpoint of factors of production, from the standpoint of labor, the rich country is rich because it has so many more high-skilled workers than the poor country. The ratio of high-skilled workers to low-skilled workers in the rich country is higher. And that means that the rich country has a comparative advantage in producing goods which use a high proportion of high-skilled workers in their production. So an example that don't require a high level of skill, and agricultural goods often fall into this category, for example, rice. So, to continue the thought experiment, let's look at these two countries, the rich country and the poor country, before globalization occurs, that is, before it's possible for the two countries to trade with one another. And we'll also look at production after globalization, after the two countries are able to trade. And the difference between the production patterns before and after can be attributed to globalization. So, before globalization occurs, before it's possible for the rich and poor countries to trade with one another, the rich country, since it wants to have both software and rice, will have to produce both software and rice. In other words, companies in the rich country will produce both software and rice. And the same thing is true in the emerging economy. There'll be both software and rice-producing companies in the emerging economy. But there's a sense in which producing software in the emerging economy is inefficient. Why? Because the emerging economy's labor force is better suited to producing rice. And in fact, there's a sense in which low-skilled workers in the emerging economy are actually hurt by the production of software. What do I mean by that? Well, low-skilled workers are not needed very much for software. And so, to the extent that production is being diverted away from rice, where low-skilled workers are needed, to software, that's going to reduce the demand for low-skilled labor. And that means that with low demand for low-skilled labor, low-skilled wages are going to tend to be reduced. And that's not good for low-skilled workers. Just the opposite is true for high-skilled workers in emerging economies. They do benefit from software production. They will be very much in demand, and they will see high wages. So what I've now just described is the production story before international trade between the rich and emerging economies becomes possible. So what happens when the door to trade opens between the rich and emerging economy? Well, in the rich country, it's no longer necessary for them to produce so much rice. They can switch production away from rice to software and import most of their rice from the emerging economy. And the emerging economy can do just the opposite. It can shift production away from software to rice and import the software from the rich country. And this is more efficient for both countries. So in particular, the emerging economy will be now producing more rice and less software than before. But what effect will this have on low-skilled workers? Well, it's producing more rice, and low-skilled workers are needed to produce rice, and so the demand for low-skilled workers will go up. Since less software is being produced, the demand for high-skilled workers is going down. So low-skilled wages are rising, high-skilled wages are falling, and inequality is reduced. But what I've just given you is the standard story for why globalization should actually reduce inequality in emerging economies. What I've given you is the comparative advantage theory behind that prediction. And in fact, the theory of comparative advantage, as I was saying, has been a remarkably successful theory historically, going back 200 years. In fact, the globalization that we are currently living under is by no means the first globalization historically. There have been several other important globalizations in history. In particular, there was an important globalization in the second half of the 19th century. At that point, there was an enormous increase in trade between Europe and North America. Now, at that point, Europe had a relative abundance of low-skilled labor. North America, particularly the United States, had a relative abundance of high-skilled labor. Because of a decline in shipping costs, there was an enormous increase in trade between the U.S. and Europe in the late 1800s. And just as the theory predicted, this led to a fall in inequality in Europe. So the theory worked very well on that occasion. But the theory has been less successful for this most recent globalization. It's been unsuccessful first because the theory predicts that the more different two countries are from one another, the bigger the difference between the two countries, the more trade we should see between them. But actually, this prediction does not hold up. For example, take a country like Malawi in Africa. It's about as different as you can get from the rich countries of Europe and North America, yet we do not see an enormous amount of trade between Malawi and Europe and the U.S. So that's one prediction that doesn't hold up so well. Another prediction is the one that I've been talking about, that we should see a decrease in inequality in emerging economies. Quite the contrary, we've been tending to see increases in inequality. And so, for the remainder of my talk this morning, I'd like to discuss why the current globalization is different from the previous ones. And to do that, I want to give you an outline of a recent theory that I have been developing in collaboration with Michael Creamer, who is a development economist at Harvard. And we concentrate on the idea that in addition to globalization meaning more international trade of goods and services, globalization means that the production process itself is internationalized. This is something that I spoke about a few minutes ago. Take computers, for example. Computers are typically a multinational or multi-country production efforts. Computers might be designed in the U.S., they might be programmed in Europe, production process. So that's one element of our alternative theory, the idea of the internationalization of production. Another element is the idea that if you should look at more than just two skill levels. I was talking about low skill and high skill labor. Now I want to look at many skill levels. Actually, for the purpose of this talk, it will suffice to look at 4 levels of skill. And to develop this alternative theory, I want to do the same kind of thought experiment that I did when talking about the theory of comparative advantage. I want to look at 2 countries, one rich, one emerging. And just as before, the rich country is rich because it has people, workers, of relatively high skills. I'll call those skill levels A and B. In the emerging economy, the skill levels are a bit lower, C and D. So A is bigger than B, B is bigger than C, C is bigger than D. The rich country is rich because of the A and B level workers. Now, a crucial ingredient of this alternative theory is the production process, the way that labor is converted into output. Let's imagine that the production process consists of different tasks, and there have to be workers assigned to each of these different tasks. Again, to make matters simple, let's assume that there are just 2 tasks that have to be performed. There's a managerial task. The managerial task is relatively sensitive to skill, so you need managers with pretty high skill in order to do the job well. And then there's a subordinate task, which is less sensitive to skill. And the idea of this theory is that output will be produced by matching managers together with subordinates, by assigning workers to the managerial task, assigning workers to the subordinate task. And how much output you get will depend on the skill levels of the workers who are fulfilling those tasks. So here is the only little mathematical formula in my talk. I hope I am not putting off people who don't like math very much, but this is pretty simple. Let's suppose that outputs equals the square of the managerial skill times the subordinate skill. Now, and the reason it's the square of the managerial skill is because I want to emphasize that the manager's skill matters a great deal. So we're squaring it, multiplying it by itself. So for example, if the managerial skill were 4, the subordinate skill were 3, this formula says that output will be 4 squared, 4 times 4, times 3, or 48. So how would we expect workers to be matched with one another according to this theory? Well, let's imagine that we have a population of workers. Again, let's look at a simple example where there are 2 workers of skill level 3. I'll call those 3 workers. And there are 2 workers of skill level 4. Those are 4 workers. There are 2 different ways that they could be matched. One possibility is for a 4 worker to be matched with another 3 worker, and the other 4 worker to be matched with the other 3 worker. This is what we might call cross-matching, because that means that we have different skill levels in the different tasks. We have high skills in the managerial task, skill level 4, low skill in the subordinate task, skill level 3. In this case, we would get a total output of 4 squared times 3 plus 4 squared times 3, because there are 2 of these matchings, for a total of 96. But there's another way that the workers could be matched, and that is to have one 4 worker matched with the other 4 worker, the other, and one 3 worker to be matched with the other 3 worker. You can calculate that now the output will be 91. Well, 91 is less than 96, and so the second matching pattern will not be seen. We will expect cross-matching instead of the second pattern, which we might call homogeneous matching, because under homogeneous matching, we have workers of the same skill matching. But this is just one example. This is an example where there are 2 3 workers and 2 4 workers. Suppose that instead we had a population with 2 2 workers, 2 4 workers. Once again, we can compare cross-matching and homogeneous matching. Under cross-matching, now we have outputs of 64, 4 squared times 2 plus 4 squared times 2. Or we could have homogeneous matching, where the output is 72. Now notice that the homogeneous matching leads to higher outputs than cross-matching, and so for this different population, we will expect homogeneous matching. Now, what am I getting at? I'm getting at the idea that depending on the available workers, we could either have cross-matching or homogeneous matching. The argument for having cross-matching is that we have 2 tasks, a managerial task and a subordinate task. All of the things being equal, we want more highly skilled workers in the managerial task, less skilled, highly skilled workers in the subordinate task. So that's an argument for cross-matching. But there's a counter-argument, which is that if the skill levels are too different, if the gap between high skill and low skill is too big, as in the second example, then homogeneous matching is better, because if a manager is too highly skilled, it's a waste to pair her with a worker of very low skill, because the high skilled manager is not going to lead to very high outputs. So what we see from this argument is that there are 2 forces pushing us in different directions. One direction is to have cross-matching, the other direction is to have homogeneous matching, and the resolution of that conflict will all depend on the available workforce. And the available workforce will depend on whether we have a globalized workforce or simply a domestic workforce. So let's go back to our 2 countries again. And internationalization of production. Before international production becomes possible, we cannot have workers in the rich country matching with workers in the poor country. In the rich country, we have the A workers match with the B workers. In the poor country, the emerging country, we have the C workers match with the D workers. Notice we don't have any matching across the two countries. That's ruled out in a pre-globalized world. But after globalization becomes possible, any sort of matching is allowed. Now, what sort of matching will we actually see? Well, we won't see C workers matched with A workers because the gap between C and A is too big, but we might well see C workers matched with B workers. The C workers are the relatively highly skilled people in the emerging economy. The B workers are the relatively low skilled people in the rich country. So the pattern on the bottom is a typical pattern you might expect after globalization of matching between workers of different skill levels. Now, what does that change imply about inequality? Well, let's look at the effect of globalization on wages, and in particular, I'm interested in the wages of the D workers. Those are the poorest people. Those are the poor people of the emerging economy. And I'm also interested in the wages of the C workers. Those are the relatively well-off people of the emerging economy. Before globalization, the D workers got to match with the C workers. That was this picture. That was this picture here. C workers were matched with D workers. That was very good for the D workers. You're probably aware that if you have the opportunity to work with someone more highly skilled than you, that makes you better too. That makes you more productive. And if you're more productive, you will earn a higher income. So before globalization, when the D workers were matched with the C workers, that was very good for the D workers. They saw their productivity enhanced and they got paid for that higher productivity. But after globalization, the C workers and D workers were no longer matched together. The C workers had these new international opportunities to match with B workers. That was good for them, but not so good for the D workers. So the D workers' wages either stay the same or perhaps even fall as a result of globalization, whereas the C workers who have these new job opportunities see their wages rise. So D worker wages fall, C worker wages rise, and inequality in the emerging economy is bigger than before. So I would argue that the story that I just told is the more relevant story, more relevant than the theory of comparative advantage in countries like India and China for explaining recent increases in inequality. Well, if we believe the story that I told, what can we do about it? What are the policy implications? Well, the most obvious policy implication is to try to raise the skill level of these D workers so that they have international job opportunities too. incentive to provide this job training. Why do I say that? Well, if I'm an unskilled worker, the worker, and you hire me, and you give me job training, which perhaps raises my skill level up to the C level, you are going to have to pay me more. So some of your investments in my skill will be lost to the fact that you now have to pay higher wages. Worse than that, I might actually go to work after you train me for one of your competitors, in which case you have lost your investments in me altogether. So that suggests that producers, companies who hire workers are not likely to have sufficient incentive to provide all of the job training that's necessary to eliminate inequality, to reduce inequality. So that means that the educational investment will have to be done by someone else. It could be done by government. That's an important source of educational investment. It could be done by international agencies. It could be done from aid. It could even be done by private foundations. But the point I want to make is that if the story I've been telling is true, and by now there is a reasonable amount of evidence that it is true, the right course of action, of course, is not to try to stop globalization. That would be counterproductive even if it were possible, because as I was saying at the beginning of my talk, globalization has been a powerful force for increasing incomes in the world. We don't want to stop globalization, but what we do want to do is to allow the low-skilled workers of the world, the D workers of the world, to share in the benefits of globalization as well. And with that observation, let me stop.